so much more opportunity to do that when you're dealing with juvenile offenders. I had worked for a criminal defense attorney, in fact, in Columbia, Jack Swirling. Some of you may have heard of him. He's big time. And I remember having a conversation with him about careers before I was graduating. And I said, I think I want to do defense work. I think, because I'd worked with him, it just made sense. And he said, let me just throw out an option. Consider this. If you're a juvenile prosecutor, you can actually have the power to make change and try to improve things from that end, instead of being on the end of where you're just asking for anything you can get. You can be the person who's making decisions and coming up with programs that might actually change the person. And he said, have you ever considered that? And I was like, well, actually I had not, because I had only worked on that side. Well, it made perfect sense to me, and all of a sudden I just knew that's what I should do. So when I met Tommy Pope, he said, I have in my mind, I am intending to have one person come in and do juvenile work their entire career here, as long as they're here. I want one person, because I want it to become a specialty as opposed to, the training ground. So he hired me. I said I'd stay. I thought he would be here forever, and I would too. And then he retired and left me here, so I'm still here, and he's gone on to greener pastures. But Kevin Brackett came on behind him. He's our prosecutor now. You'll meet him, and I know y'all have already probably know him or know of him. And he did the same thing. He said, I need to build up the juvenile prosecution end of what we're doing, because again, that's where we can make the most change. The quicker we can get to them, the better. So when I was hired here in 1993, that was what it was done. So I feel like their desire to put resources into our area, the juvenile area, has really helped. So one of the things we also wanted to do was put a new emphasis on juvenile crime. And so when I'm speaking at Rotary clubs or Optimist clubs or what have you, I always ask, and I can always stump people, so I'm probably going to stump y'all too. What do y'all think is the most important crime that I prosecute? The most important crime that I prosecute? Well, generally, most people will say murder. It's got to be murder. You've probably done a murder case. That's important. I'll say, yeah, that's pretty important. But I'm not saying the most violent or the most serious. I'm saying the most important crime. Well, let me tell you.
Fight.
It's truancy. Truancy. Makes sense, right?
Mm-hmm.
Truancy to me is the most important crime that we prosecute. And there are many prosecutors' offices, and they're just doing it because they don't have the resources, who look at truancy as just, we just can't get to those because we got kids carrying guns and selling drugs. We can't put an emphasis on truancy. But we decided early on, this was early in the early 90s, that we needed, or right when I got here pretty much, about, I guess in 1995, we decided that truancy, we needed to go upstream. You hear the stories of who's throwing all the babies in the river, and somebody's out there saying, somebody's down at the end of the river and they're pulling out all the babies, and somebody starts walking away, and the guy goes, where are you going? He said, I'm going to find out who's putting all these babies in the river, because you're trying to go upstream and get to them. And I've always thought that truancy is where we should start. First of all, it's usually the first offense that a kid has ever done. It's also, too, when you look at an adult offender in the General Sessions Court and you look at his juvenile record or her juvenile record, guess what one of the first offenses is? Truancy. It makes perfect sense. If you don't get your education, you don't have any training and no ability to go out and get a job. And these days, with our low unemployment rate, it's been very hard for people to get jobs without having an education. And so we felt like without education, you can't get a job. You generally are very hopeless oftentimes and have to resort to a life of crime. So we knew that we had to do something about truancy. And also, too, we thought that, we're benefiting our community, but we're benefiting people. Getting these young people to get a job. And let me tell you, we've got some of the best schools, and I'm talking Rock Hill, I'm talking Clover, I'm talking York, and I'm talking Fort Mill. We have some of the best options for young people who are a little bit off the normal track. If they can't do school because they need to work some. They have, you know, the Phoenix Academy, and they just have so many options for young people. And I'm so pleased with a lot of what our schools do, because I do believe that's led to a lot of the things that we have seen in that have been beneficial to children, or that that our schools are doing so much more. I'm not saying they're perfect. I'm sure there are plenty of issues we could point at, but the fact that every school has a true good alternative school, and many of the schools work around certain abilities. They can have like online school that is run out of the school, and like I said, the Phoenix Academy, just really great options for young people. So we believe that if we can keep these young people in school, then we can definitely improve their lives, and in improving their lives generally, it's going to come back to us too. So we always think that truancy is one of those that we have to start with. So what did we do to make truancy a priority? We knew that collaboration with the schools were important. Whitney and I both feel very passionate about this. The information that we have from our school districts, we have a staffing here in this room every single Monday morning. It lasts for about an hour, from 9:30 or from 10 o'clock to 11 o'clock usually, right? It's about an hour or so, a little over sometimes. Oh, sometimes it's been to 11:30. But we have all of the school officials who deal with truancy from all 4 school districts come to this room, and we talk about every single truant offender. And it's a staffing where we try to offer suggestions about what the school can do to try to get the child enrolled again and get the child going. And then we try to figure out what can we do to make this kid go to school. And sometimes just having that staffing and having all the minds that are in this room talk about what the problems are, we can oftentimes help the schools come up with other options to try to get the young person in school. And as a last resort, we have some other programs like the Truancy Alternative Program, which is patterned very much like our juvenile arbitration. Because before, the only way to have a truancy hearing, have a young person under a truancy order would be to take them to court. And that bogged down our courts, because we had, do y'all remember, it was our number 2 most prosecuted case was truancy. So we knew that we needed to figure out a way to get them out of the court system, kind of like what we do with these offenses here. And Whitney was very smart and came up with a truancy alternative program. It literally was one of those things where we say, well, let's just try it, see if it works. If it works, we'll continue. If it doesn't work, we won't continue. So it has had a great success rate, because little less than half the juveniles who have had to come to court after they've been in that program. And you might say, well, gosh, that means half failed out and half did. But the success of us bringing them to court only and not offering them a program was only 25% went back to school, religiously and regularly. So we have seen, even though it's half, and that doesn't seem like a great huge number, it's better than the number that we had when we would bring them to court. But what we have found with the truant offender, and I could talk all night about what makes a truant offender so difficult, but usually the problem is not going to school. It's usually so many other issues, including just lack of family structure, lack of emphasis on education. Daddy didn't go get his education. He's like, you don't need it. I don't need it. We don't need it. Just no priority of school is not a priority, all that sort of stuff. So many different things to deal with here, and that's what makes it very difficult. But we have seen a great improvement since we started that program.
In terms of truancy, how is it defined? I mean, if they miss a day of school, that's not truancy.
Right. It's either 3 days or 3 days consecutively, or 5 days total. But I do have to say, the law changed about maybe 5 years ago, or maybe even longer, time flies, where the schools have to do more early on. They have to have an intervention plan with the family and try to come up with, almost like what we do in our TAP program, they do at the school. We feel like we get a little bit more out of it in our truancy alternative program, because we're the power of the court kind of coming on them. But the school tries to come up with ideas about, you got to get them to school. What can we do to help? I mean, offering them programs like, counseling or a lot of these. I'm so amazed at all the young people who have serious anxiety issues. And now, granted, a lot of times we say they just got to push through. I mean, some kids have debilitating anxiety about things, and these schools are so large, and the kids are just kind of getting swept up, and they just can't find their way, and you can see that they have doctors who will write them notes and write them out and give them medication and all kinds of stuff for a lot of anxiety. We also have been dealing a lot with trauma. That is kind of a new buzzword that you'll hear if you start like doing any juvenile research about what the new buzzwords are, because occasionally you'll hear these things. It's all trauma, don't y'all think, Ray and Denise? For the past like 2 or 3 years, they're talking about how young people, the trauma that because you can imagine chaos in some of these homes. You can just imagine the chaos. And then them trying to understand what they've been through when we are trying to deal with them, and how law enforcement interacts with people who might have been through trauma and traumatic situations and things of that nature. So I do feel like we've kind of started trying to understand the mindset of a person who is suffering from a lot of PTSD and things like that, maybe it's starting to get some more
Ray
stuff.
and I took the training for that.
Yeah.
Basically, you'll also hear the term ACEs, and that deals with the trauma as well. And it's just a really good course that allows you to start identifying. We all took some mental health training. And I think every one of us just about in this office, didn't we, Ouida?
We did.
And so that we can identify some of that. And with the arbitration hearings, we use an assessment. Ray has the kids do them. He and I can enter them into the system, and it tells us, okay, this percentage of the time this kid has this problem, and they're exceptionally honest, and so that allows us to refer to the appropriate agencies. But I do have to brag on TAP just a little bit, because that cutting it in half has impressed so many people in the state of South Carolina.
Oh, absolutely.
That Lexington County literally got a grant and came in, and then we went there to help them set up a program. And
Horry County too.
And we also were part of the Children's Law Center in their handbook as far as how to handle truancy. So they're across the state,
right?
They know that it is helped.
Of just notoriety through the state, because nobody knows how to deal with truants. And so, I always
and
like.
For years, I worked for juvenile justice, and as a probation officer, the worst thing in the world was to get a truant.
Yeah.
Because they're the hardest. I'd always say, give me my gangsters, everything else. They were.
Wow, that's so surprising to me.
Isn't it though?
But they just didn't want to go to school.
And for a bunch of reasons.
Is it normally like super poor people that can't get out?
No.
It could be
it's
wealthier people
it sure
too.
is, yeah.
So is the root of it just parents that just don't care?
I think it's a lot of multiple. I definitely think there are a lot of the young people their parents don't have their education. They don't have any value on education. They don't care about it, and they don't try to encourage their child. But I also think a considerable amount of it are kids who just cannot deal with the some of the other things that go on in school these days. I mean, these big schools that we have, and a lot of kids, they'll look for excuses. So let me just say, the majority of the ones that we deal with, really, they're perfectly capable of going to school. But we do have a considerable amount of kids who have terrible anxiety and reasons that they just are dealing with. I can't be around people. I've got this problem or that
And
problem.
some families, and that's NAMI's don't talk to us about.
Oh,
this
yeah,
too, are so overwhelmed. Like I had a hearing in Clover back before Thanksgiving, and the mother had 3 sons on the spectrum. The youngest one was mute, and 2 daughters dealing with anxiety. So the daughters are just you know, doing this, and she's trying to deal with all that. And so sometimes it becomes very overwhelming for some of these families and stuff. And very often there's a lot of mental health
Yeah, a
problems
lot.
going with that. And it's hard
Yeah.
for families to deal with it. And
A lot of
but-
depression with the parents, and the parents don't do very much. I mean, just kind of just a,
It takes some effort. A lot of the parents don't have that, well, I know some cases, where the parent doesn't get up to help get the kids right.
Exactly.
And they get in that pattern at a young age.
and then
you
they
know.
can't break it.
Right.
Right, and then, so they're going, so if they're like that way in the 3rd grade or 2nd grade, or they think, I got a nephew that said, great nephew, the best time, he called him getting to school on time as long as he got to school before lunch.
Wow.
Right.
And we
And
also
so-
have some families that are so overstressed because the kids are having to raise themselves.
Yeah.
The moms having to, and dads are usually just one parent, are having to work 2 or 3 jobs.
Yeah.
Then, and they can't be there to get them up and get them dressed.
And then we do have, of course, alcohol and drug use by the parents
Parents
too.
also.
So I mean, there's a
So it's
lot
a
that comes
big-
back to
So
it.
many
It's so many
grandparents
different moving parts,
having to-
because we do have parents who are struggling getting their children to school. But then we have a considerable amount of them that are laying up in the bed watching, you know, Jerry Springer with them. I had a couple that I ended up years ago. I've now prosecuted the girl that I prosecuted her child because she didn't send him to school, and I prosecuted her mama because she didn't send her to school. I mean, it's just,
You've seen
it's
it
just,
come back
around.
I've
gosh.
prosecuted grandchildren. I've been here so long,
What?
so I see all of them.
Oh my
I have,
goodness.
yeah.
That's
Yeah.
Because it's so
Wow.
sad, it's so sad, but ultimately, you know, with the good news is that, like we said, even though some might say, oh, that's only, you have no idea. When you have a program that is getting half the kids that were not going to school, getting to school, that to me is just worth celebrating. So we're very excited
Well,
about
that's
that program.
wonderful.
Yeah.
And Whitney came up with that?
She sure did. We were talking one day about what are we going to do with these truants. We were spending all this time in court, and she said, wonder why we don't do something like arbitration. We were like, huh? Wow, that's a great idea. And I said, but how are we going to monitor them? We didn't have staff to hire somebody. So DJJ said that they would help us monitor, and it just kind of worked out that everybody we pulled our resources as far as, okay, we can handle them while we're, Denise has it on her caseload, or sort of caseload that she presents to us when we're in our staff meetings. The people from the school bring the information, DJJ offers programs, and it's just everybody doing a little
Well,
bit.
working with the schools, that's
Huge.
That's
Huge.
yeah, that's a
And-
mastermind.
It is.
And the TAP hearings, usually they have several different people there. And so we have pooled resources. We have a school rep, we have a DJJ rep as a rule, and then either Whitney, Ouida, or I will facilitate the hearing. And so with all those people at the same table, it's very effective.
Because we've actually thought about doing, having volunteers that we train, maybe former school teachers, to actually do the hearings for us, almost exactly like arbitration, except with volunteers. We haven't, done that yet because it was working with what we had, and sometimes these places, I would be very sad if I were a teacher and I was trying so hard to get this child motivated. We know it's hard. They may not realize how hard it is. We don't want to set them up for, half of them not working out. But we're thinking about doing that down the road, maybe having some sort of a training for some school retired teachers to see if they would like to be part of that, almost like how y'all are doing it here, but doing it with those TAP cases. But one other program that we have that I'm going to pass out one of our little pamphlets on is called Project Care.
You have a TAP one too.
Oh, I do have a TAP one. Thank you. I'm going to pass that one out too. That goes with the TAP. The Project Care, y'all may remember this or you may not. I hope it was a blip on the radar that y'all didn't pick up on. But years ago, probably 15 years ago, we had Rock Hill PD, Rock Hill Police Department, charged a boy who was 12 years old with stealing his own Christmas present out of his grandmother's closet. Do y'all remember that by chance? It made CNN News.
Oh my
Yes.
goodness.
So the child and his mother lived beside the grandmother, and the child went in because he wanted to get the Xbox or whatever it was early. He went into his grandmother's house and he took his Christmas present. And that's probably not me, isn't it? And we're getting there, so we don't have much longer. But took